Okay, welcome back. I don't know if we'll get as far as I was thinking of going tonight around New Year's. And there are so many things that always rattle around in my mind around, letting go of parts of the past that we might not be so happy about and embracing something about the future that we have thoughts on. In a way, it always seems kind of trite that we do it, now. We just choose this time at the beginning of the year. But I also think of it as times of like the solstice or in spring with the change of blossoming out from winter to spring. But I came upon an article that I really liked. I don't know if anybody gets the Daily Good. Has anybody ever heard of the Daily Good? It's, I really like this. I don't know how many years ago I started subscribing to it, but it's like news that inspires. And so in today's publication, it was something published by Maria Popova. And there's a syndicated publication called the marginalian.org. But it was called Resolutions for a Life Worth Living, Attainable Aspirations Inspired by Great Humans of the Past. And so it made me think a little bit more about the just the importance if we take time to do it. To have a little ceremony for ourselves. And, it might not be our time tonight to do this, or you might want to do something more intentional on your own. But in a way, to me, I like doing it as sort of anchoring a kind of course of correction, and it helps me ground myself. And it's important to do because otherwise I sort of lose track of my life about, I can end up after months of plowing through sort of without feeling much mindfulness. And sometimes I can come to a point sort of saying, why am I doing this? And what's my life about? And so it's not that things are that extreme right now, but just we have experiences of loss and, sometimes our meaning and our purpose gets a little lost, and we can help ourselves stay on track and not always hit those really low points. If we take some time to pay attention mindfully and look over the past year of our lives and pull out some threads of wisdom or knowledge that we've gained and appreciate them and actually, pay attention to things that are aspirations for ourselves, as well as mourning of some things that we're letting go of. But in her article, Maria Popova, she mentions quite a few people here. Let me see. I don't know how many, but I'm going to just mention a few. One is Hannah Arendt, Arendt, Love Without Fear of Loss. If we abide by the common definition of philosophy as the love of wisdom, and if Montaigne was right, that philosophy is the art of learning to die, then living wisely is the art of learning how you will wish you have lived, of kind of resolution in reverse. This is where the wisdom of lives that have already been lived can be of immense aid, a source of forward-facing resolutions, borrowed from people who have long died, having lived by any reasonable standard, honorable and generous lives, lives of beauty and substance, And so, love without fear of loss, Hannah Ardent. We will lose everything we love, including our lives. So we might as well love without fear. For to fear a certainty is wasted energy that siphons life from aliveness. Long before she became America's premier philosopher, having arrived as a refugee, her birth and death was 1906 to 1975. She was a young Jewish woman in Nazi-inflamed Germany, and she was in love with an improbable beloved, and writing a doctoral thesis about love that remains her least known but most soulful work, Love and St. Augustine. It's an exquisite meditation on love and how to live with the fundamental fear of loss. Here's another quote from her. In their fear of death, those living fear life itself, a life that is doomed to die. The mode in which life knows and perceives itself is worry. Thus, the object of fear comes to be fear itself. Even if we would assume that there is nothing to fear, that death is no evil, the fact of fear that all living things shun death remains. And another person you might be familiar with is Toni Morrison. Cherish your body. Partway in time between Walt Whitman's declamation that the body is the meaning, the main concern, and includes and is the soul, and its affirmation by modern neuroscience, which is revealing how the feeling tone of the body scores the symphony of consciousness. Toni Morrison lived from 1931 to 2019. In her 1987 masterpiece, Beloved, one of her first, which made her the first writer ensouled in a body with black skin and XX chromosomes, she received the Nobel Prize. And she writes, love your hands, love them, raise them up and kiss them, touch others with them, pat them together, stroke them on your face, love your mouth. This is flesh, flesh that needs to be loved, feet that need to rest and to dance, backs that need support, shoulders that need arms, strong arms. Love your neck, put a hand on it, grace it, stroke it, and hold it up. And all your inside parts that they'd just as soon slop for hogs, you've got to love them. The dark, dark liver, love it, love it. The beat and beating heart, love that too. More than eyes or feet, more than lungs that have yet to draw free air, more than your life-holding womb and your life-giving private parts. Love your heart, for this is the prize. And many of us know Viktor Frankl. Have more music and nature in your life. I've compiled a lot of quotes from Viktor Frankl that I've read before in previous places, but he was born in 1905 and died in 1997. And he narrowly escaped death in a concentration camp. And he delivered a set of extraordinary lectures on moving beyond optimism and pessimism to find the deepest source of meaning. And in one of his publications, he speaks with passionate, life-tested conviction to the two great pillars of aliveness that have helped him survive the Holocaust and to help so many of us, even in circumstances far less life-threatening, survive our lives, music and the natural world. It is not only through our actions that we can give life meaning. Insofar as we can answer life's specific questions responsibly, we can fulfill the demands of existence, not only as active agents, but also as loving human beings. in our loving dedication to the beautiful, the great, the good. Should I perhaps try to explain for you with some hackneyed phrase how and why experiencing beauty can make life magnificent? I prefer to confine myself to the following thought experiment. Imagine that you are sitting in a concert hall and listening to your favorite symphony. And your favorite bars of the symphony resound in your ears, and you are so moved by the music that it sends shivers down your spine. And now imagine that it would be possible, something that is psychologically so impossible, for someone to ask you in this moment whether your life has meaning. I believe you would agree with me if I declared that in that case, you would only be able to give one answer, and it would go something like, "It would have been worth it to have lived for this moment alone." And the last one I think I'll share is Leo Tolstoy, "Choose kindness." And in this article, she says, one of the saddest tendencies in our present culture is an indignant intolerance for the basic humanity of being human. People of the past are harshly judged by standards of the present, which their own difficult lives helped establish. And people of the present are harshly judged by impossible and hypocritical, in the full context of any judger's life, standards of uniform perfection across all religions of private and public existence. And yet the eternal test of character, our great moral triumph, is the ability to face our own imperfections with composure, reflecting on them with lucid and luminous determination to do better. An essential form of moral courage, all the more difficult and all the more important amid a cultural atmosphere that mistakes self-righteousness for morality and suffocates the basic impulse toward betterment with punitive intolerance for human foible. Luckily for Leo Tolstoy, he was born in September of 1828 and he died in November of 1910. And for the generation of humans whose lives have been enriched and ennobled by his contributions to the common record of truth and beauty that we call literature, he lived in a very different era. When he was approaching that era's life expectancy, which would come to outlive nearly twofold to act otherwise, he began reckoning with his own imperfect life, punctuated by the human inevitability of having acted unwisely and unlovingly in moments too mentally and emotionally threadbare to act otherwise, and set out to find the wisdom he had lacked along the path. So he began something that he called Calendar of Wisdom, and it was daily thoughts to nourish the soul, written and selected texts from the world's sacred texts, a compendium of quotations by great thinkers of the past, annotated with his own thoughts, and he compiled for 2 decades and then published the final piece when he was in the ailing years of his life. In the entry for January 7th, perhaps prompted by the creaturely severity and the heart-clenching bleakness of a Russian winter, or perhaps by the renewed resolve for moral betterment with which we face each new year, he writes, "The kinder and the more thoughtful a person is, the more kindness one can find in other people. Kindness enriches our life. With kindness, mysterious things become clear. Difficult things become easy, and dull things become cheerful. At the end of the month, in a sentiment Carl Sagan would come to echo in his lovely invitation to meet ignorance with kindness. Tolstoy writes, You should respond with kindness toward evil done to you, and you will destroy in an evil person that pleasure which they derive from evil. Kindness is for your soul as healthy is for your body. You do not notice it when you have it. So some of the other people that she writes about in this article are James Baldwin, have tenderness for how hard it is to be human. Rachel Carson, embracing the loneliness of creative work. Ursula Le Guin, converse if you care. Bertrand Russell, broaden your life as it grows shorter. Walt Whitman, live with absolute aliveness. So maybe I'll copy this article, although it has a very long title, but I'll figure out a way to put it in our chat box or send it out later. Let me see if I can copy it here. I might be able to, yeah. But I found these to be kind of just encouraging and useful for thinking about, especially when I sort of, woke up thinking, New Year's, another new year, we're all sort of depressed with everything that's going on in life, and we do our best to stay cheery, but, it's not always easy. And having inspiration from others who have gone before us in this broad spectrum of people that she wrote about. And if you ever feel like it, thedailygood.org is the place you can sign up to have their newsletters sent to you. It's the Daily Good, which is kind of pleasant. So before I carry on with any other of my brilliant ideas, I would love to hear from you to see how your sitting went, what's on your mind. Hi, Sherry. Wait a minute. Let me make sure my speaker's on. Okay, what's up? Oh, wait, I don't hear you. Why would that be? Let me check my audio thing here. Speaker, same as system. I'm plugged in.
Some source.
Okay, there we go. Try again.
Candle.
Yeah.
Okay. The one that is have tenderness towards the difficulty of being human.
Mm-hmm.
Who was that?
Let me go.
It was near the end.
Yes, I believe that might have been James Baldwin. Yeah. Yeah, have tenderness for how hard it is to be human. Here's a couple of quotes from that little section. I have always felt that a human being could only be saved by another human being. I am aware that we do not save each other very often, but I am also aware that we save each other some of the time. In the final essay from the same forgotten treasure, Baldwin revisits the subject in what can best be described as a prose poem of eternal truth. The earth is always shifting, the light is always changing, the sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witness they have. The sea rises, the light fails, lovers cling to each other, and children cling to us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out. But to hold each other in the faith of love is no small triumph for our fear-frayed hearts. In one of his final interviews, echoing Rilke's insistence that for one human being to love another, that is perhaps the most difficult in all of our tasks. Baldwin reflects, loving anybody and being loved by anybody is a tremendous danger, a tremendous responsibility. And yet, he told Margaret Mead in their historic conversation, it is a responsibility to our humanity. We've got to be as clear-headed about human beings as possible because we are still each other's only hope. Yeah, James Baldwin is a fantastic writer and speaker too. Anybody else
And
want to say anything?
Indeed. It's a nice compendium of authors to use. I really appreciated them including Hannah Arendt. But it's not a work I've read of hers, but she's in my field, German philosophy, and she was in love with her professor, who was Martin Heidegger, who was signed up as a party member. And yeah. Interesting. I had no idea that she wrote about love while she was writing that with him as an advisor.
Interesting.
It makes me really want to read that piece.
Interesting title, Love and St. Augustine.
And what is her full name?
Hannah Arendt.
Arendt. Hannah.
Right. Hannah, Arednt.
The books that you'd probably know of her are The Banality of Evil and The Trial of Eichmann in Jerusalem.
Yeah, this is a really good article, and it's inspiring to make you go read some of these people.
I actually didn't know that about Tolstoy, that he spent the last 20 years. I mean,
compiling those phrases. Just think now we get them just delivered by somebody in our email boxes. From a lot of different people. Everybody's saying for the day. Well, in my quest here to just think about New Year things, kind of, and I was reading something from Doyle Banks, who was one of our teachers at PIMC, and he does things on his own, and he has a newsletter that he sends out. And he mentioned somewhere recently about using Brendan Burchard's 3 primary aspirations, and that they're aspirations that we have, and we generally as human beings, who am I? Who am I becoming? Who do I want to become? And that type of thing. And then there's growing. Am I growing? Am I expanding? Am I getting better at my skills, my craft, better at my life? And so in taking those 3 areas, being, growing, and then thirdly is relating, aspirations. Am I showing up in my relationships the way I want to be? And so he suggests using those 3 areas, which I really like the idea of, because I'm usually at a loss when I try to think, well, what are my aspirations? I can come up with usually something fairly simple, wanting to be a kinder human being, or something really ordinary, me, not falling asleep during meditation. But actually, taking pen in hand and thinking about, am I growing? Am I expanding? relationally, what are my aspirations? Do I show up the way I want to in relationships? And that can go into, do I achieve something professionally the way I wanted to, or I might see over the last year where I've had victories, or where I had something that seemed like a win in some way, or have I accomplished anything or become better at something. I tend not to think about this stuff because it sounds so kind of competitive like with myself, but I think it's useful to reflect. It's like thinking about our good deeds. It's helpful to reflect on what we've achieved, and celebrating them, and how do we feel about them, and looking back and noticing what feelings come up right now as we think about some of that, and maybe putting ourselves back at that moment. When did something occur during the last year that you might have been proud of, or something that you worked through that might have been a really difficult thing. And we might also ask ourselves what dreams or needs or desires might have been met that we accomplished. And so if you can bring yourself to think about this, and you have that paper and pencil there, let's just take a few minutes. Let me pull out my paper. Let's just take a few minutes to see if any of this coalesces, reflecting back on what might come up of what we are happy about ourselves about. What reflections do we have that are coming up that can be our good deeds that we are thinking about? Where did you have any victories or any wins, so to speak? Did you become better at something? Or how you related with a partner? See if you can think of some successes that you've enjoyed, and let yourself bask in it. Give yourself a pat on the back. And this can be celebrated because it not only anchors what we did that worked well, but it can inspire us to continue doing some things coming up in the coming year. Okay, I'm going to give us a few minutes to do this. So this is just a short exercise, but it might inspire you to do more after we're done with our session tonight. But the second part of this is more around sort of kind of mourning at the end of the year. So Marshall Rosenberg, who wrote the book Nonviolent Communication, Doyle mentions and it talks about his book, The Language of Life. And in that book, Marshall Rosenberg makes a suggestion that one of the things that we can do to process the negatives that happen in our lives is to mourn, and particularly mourn where maybe we might have missed the mark somewhere, somehow in some aspect of our lives. Maybe there's a situation where we didn't show up in a relationship the way we wanted to, or we might have even done some harm with something negative that we said to another person, or did some damage to a relationship. And that we want to mourn that. And we want to allow ourselves to feel the disappointment and the sadness and maybe a sense of loneliness or whatever other feelings come up. Not to get stuck in it and not to beat ourselves up, but to fully experience those feelings so that we can then let them process on through and move the negatives out and replace with positives, so that we can look at a situation again using a broader sense of understanding. And, you know, it might be something sort of nuts and bolts, like maybe we didn't really allow ourselves to feel into or lean into an experience, and maybe some needs were left unmet. Or maybe we had some dreams that were left unfulfilled that were some factors that played into it. Or maybe, you know, we didn't put enough time aside for something that we wanted to learn more about, or just take some time to see and to feel inside if there's anything or a few things that might come into a list from your heart that maybe are some things you would mourn about. It's not like we're going to say, oh, I shoulda, coulda, woulda about this and that, but it's just, here's how I felt. And this is some of the needs or the dreams that were unmet, or some adjustments that I can make if I want to pursue something that I left behind and didn't pursue. And by feeling them and acknowledging them and not beating ourselves up about it and not being critical of ourselves, but allowing ourselves some forgiveness, forgiving ourselves. We did the best we could, and we can let that go. And we can let go of a tendency and an urge to blame ourselves or beat ourselves up. But we can forgive ourselves and move on. And we can set an intention to let it go. But sometimes if it's, you know, something very significant in our lives, it might take a while to actually let go of negative feelings about it. And we can set the intention as best we can right now, and at some point in time, let it go when it goes naturally. So let's just take some time again now to Look inside and see if anything comes up that is something that we might be mourning. We might come to a realization that there's something that it's not really what I wanted to do. And so for now, bringing this to a close, you can just take a glance back through wherever there are any other celebrations or mournings that we miss that might pop up or that we want to acknowledge. And just take a few deep breaths, 3 to 5 deep breaths. Nice, slow, deep breaths. Let's check our bodies. Scan the body. Are we holding on to anything? Was there something that created some tension or stress that we need to pay attention to right now, in this moment? And as I just try to relax and make a note so that I can deal with it at another point in time, let it go as best I can at this moment, or make the commitment to come back to it at a later date. And may we offer ourselves gratitude. May we be grateful that we've worked hard in our relationships in the past year. Grateful for whatever efforts we might want to acknowledge about ourselves in our profession. We might bring to mind other people that helped us and supported us. Gratitude for our close friends, those that might be our mentors or who we've worked with, or our teachers, people that stuck with us when things didn't go so well. And just bringing up that gratitude and send it outwards, send that gratitude outwards and inwards to ourselves and outward to the others that we bring to mind. And may we offer ourselves some appreciation. Appreciating how we showed up in certain situations. We have created a really wonderful connection with friends or family in certain situations. Appreciating ourselves for how we've worked so consistently and persistently through the past year in so many arenas, just to stay in love and not in fear during these very challenging times. May we be inspired to step up into the new year with more confidence and more joy, curiosity and excitement. And may we meet new challenges as they come along with an open heart. We gained another year of experience, of meeting challenges and succeeding and achieving some goals and maybe making some dreams come true. Dealing with challenges and obstacles when things didn't go our way. May we notice these moments of confidence and more joy, and may we hold ourselves gently and openly and be free from fear. Thank you for doing this with me in whatever way you chose to participate. As you know, I often have my little goddess. I think Sandra, at least you have participated in this ritual maybe at least once, where usually I have us write something on one side of the paper and something else on the other side of the paper, something we're letting go of and something we have an aspiration to. And usually at the end of each year, I have some kind of burning ceremony and I burn them and then we have a new section for the next year. But I haven't had any outdoor ceremonies, so it has filled up still from, let's see if there's any dates on these. My aspiration is to discover and cultivate more joy in my life for the benefit of myself and all beings. And the backside is wanting to let go of could be criticism, self-judgment, attachment to easeful, carefree life I believed I would be living in retirement. I hear somebody with better writing. I'd like to let go of spiritual laziness and self-forgetting. Hey, you know what? This was it was 2 years ago, but it was in January. I'd like to cultivate equanimity and celebrate equanimity and determination, purpose. Oh, I like this. I like sharing this with you. And it was just from 2 years ago in January. Let go of clinging to the desire to save everything. Aspirations sit with the discomfort of letting go of stuff. So that's a few of what was left in here. And maybe when we meet finally in person again next year, we'll be able to let go of these. Here's someone letting go of the impulse-driven behavior expectations upon others and aspiring steady mindfulness to silliness, joy, to know courage. So we are not alone in the struggle of letting go of things that are so ingrained upon us and the desire to have aspirations for freedom. And you don't have to read to me what you wrote tonight, but if you feel like sharing it, you can. But I want you to really use it as fodder or a way of continued maybe journaling or just an acknowledgement of what we mourn from letting go of from the last year and what we are happy that we sort of accomplished about ourselves, and may it inspire us to stay alive and find interest in these now dark, dreary days of winter. And we have each other to reflect with. Anyone have any sharing they feel like doing around the process, or just something you want to share with us?
I feel like I've gone through a really difficult experience lately, and that in spite of how challenging it was, I feel like I've learned a lot about myself and how to cope with difficult situations and how to retain some equanimity in the face of.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I would just like to remind us of one of the phrases of the Buddha that came out of the Anguttara Nikaya. I don't envision a single thing that is as quick to reverse itself as the mind. So much so that there is no satisfactory simile for how quick to reverse itself it is. I like to apply that when I'm working with difficult thoughts. That things can, the mind can quickly reverse itself. I often don't really think that when I'm in the middle of discursive thinking that seems to never end, but eventually it seems to soften and calm and become a little bit more of an unobtrusive stream. But it's hard not to notice that these strong bouts of thinking are fueled largely by identification and preoccupation, about myself and thoughts. And clearly observing thinking, we can step outside of that identification and see how quickly the mind really can change through letting go.
This has been really helpful. I don't really need to share anything particular, but thank you for starting me on it. I think I'm going to come back to the document I created.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. I toyed with the idea of not doing it because there are so many ways that people approach the new year. But then Bill said to me, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know. I've got like 5 different things rattling around in my mind. There's the Great Blessing, there's the Metta chants, there's this article, and, then there's maybe some kind of New Year's, ceremony or something." And he said, "Oh, do the New Year's ceremony. It's rare. It doesn't happen that often. It only happens once a year." So I took his advice.
And that's something to write down in your...
Oh, good idea. That's really a good idea. Do you think that's on the good side of things?
I do.
Okay.
I absolutely do.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to put it in here. Took Bill's advice. He's gotten into a phrase which has been making us laugh, which is, "Oh, you're right." So he figures if he just says, "Oh, you're right," under circumstances where we might continue the conversation in a way that wasn't so pleasant, it makes us laugh. And of course, I'm right. So, hey.
That's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. And we also started out on New Year's Eve by watching Joe Coy's presentation on Netflix in Hawaii. Has anybody heard Joe Coy? Jokoy. He's a stand-up comedian, and he's Filipino, and he uses his mother and his son for almost all of his humor. And at first, his mother was appalled that he was going to be a clown when he grew up. And then, though, when she started hearing his stories and they were all about her, then she kind of actually liked them. He runs them by her so that she's not too terribly embarrassed. But Joe Coy, he has one in Seattle, one in Hawaii, and he spent I don't know how many years trying to get Netflix to pick him up, and they kept refusing. So finally he spent like all the money he had and produced it in Seattle the way Netflix would produce it. He spent thousands and thousands of dollars on producing it. And then when he got finished with it, Netflix picked it up. And then he decided to do the one that they were willing to produce in Hawaii. And it's really hilarious. The last half was pretty, well, you might not want to watch the entirety of the last half. But for a stand-up comedian, he doesn't make fun of other people. The people that he is humorous about, they know he's being. And if you look up YouTube on little vignettes of him, you'll see him having a conversation with his mother. You'll have him seeing a conversation with his son, showing his son all these bits that he wrote about him. and then asking him about them, sitting there on the couch beside him. It's all pretty funny. But I digress.
It's a great
Thank you for
laughter.
being here.